Well, here we go again. Federal prosecutors just cracked another one, this time busting a pair of fake grocery stores set up and run by Haitian immigrants living in the state of Massachusetts that allegedly committed up to $7 million of EBT and SNAP fraud. And this is an interesting story because it actually proves multiple of the conspiracy theories, quote unquote, that we've been pushing about the SNAP program correct. Whether that's a fact that, yes, in this country, especially in blue states, there is a widespread epidemic of fake businesses and nonprofits who are committing welfare fraud, stealing money from the state and federal government. That's a well-established fact. Just look at Minnesota. But secondly, even as it pertains to the SNAP recipients themselves, there is a widespread epidemic, contrary to what Democrats tell us about how 40 million Americans in this country really are just starving and genuinely need it. No, who are either defrauding or at the very least taking advantage of the system. And that's proven by the fact that in this case, it's not just about the business owners themselves. You had countless, potentially hundreds to thousands of people who were coming into the store and simply exchanging their food stamps for cash, to which you ask, if these people were genuinely starving, if they actually needed the EBT, how could that be the case? Well, we'll get into all of that, but I first of all just want to start by pointing out before we actually break down the story that, do you notice in every single one of these cases virtually, first of all, they almost exclusively happen in blue states, but secondly, it takes the federal government to actually step in and notice, hey, this business or this machine is obviously fraudulent. Why exactly is it that the Democrat-ran state governments never raise red flags or alarm bells or audit the very things that are going on in their own states? And I think the answer there is very obvious, as I've been trying to explain to people. If you were a legitimate political party, heck, if you're just a politician who, regardless of ideology, just wants to serve and do the best for the people, I mean, shouldn't it be of your own concern too, by the way? Because some of these programs are jointly funded both by the federal government and the state government, so also they're stealing money from your state. Yeah, shouldn't it be a concern to a mayor, a governor? Hey, these people are stealing money from your state. That is less money that you can spend on whatever political pet project you want because a bunch of potentially your voters are committing fraud with it. Well, that's the entire point, because this is actually what Democrats want the money to be spent on. As I've been saying, the party is basically a criminal organization and a front for money laundering, and that is frankly the only plausible explanation as to why it takes the feds here to intervene every single time, because apparently Democrat states are cool with people stealing their taxpayer money, right? And of course, the perception maybe that certain people have of liberals is that, oh, well, you know, they're just woke. They want people to receive more government benefits. We want to help people out. They're more compassionate. Yet in reality, a bunch of people who genuinely are not in need are just stealing that money, and the Democrat states are okay with it. It's like, yeah, as I've been saying again, the only explanation for that is they're cool with the fraud, likely because they're also in on it. And yes, conveniently woke left-wing politics, whether that's let the criminals out of jail time and time again, or, you know, give out more government benefits to people and not really audit it because that would be quote unquote racist. All of this really would be a very convenient excuse and sort of a reason to throw out as to why massive fraud's happening in your state. But of course, that's just the cover story, is it not? But anyways, let's get into this, guys. First though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support. And that said, here, take a listen to the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts as she apparently explains what went down here with the fake grocery stores. And you're asking, fake grocery store, what does that even mean? We'll take a listen.
We are announcing federal charges against two men, Antonio Bonner and Saul Elisme, for large-scale SNAP benefit trafficking, a scheme that turned a program designed to feed families into a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. SNAP benefits are also known as food stamps. The defendants are charged with one count of food stamp fraud. As alleged in the charging documents, these men abused one of the government's most critical safety net programs for their own financial gain. This is taxpayer money meant to keep people from going hungry. These defendants decided to take it for themselves. These defendants exchanged SNAP benefits for cash, which they pocketed. Bonner, a naturalized U.S. citizen from Haiti, owned the Jesuela Variety Store. Elisme, a lawful permanent resident also from Haiti, owned the Saul Mache Mixe store. These two businesses were co-located within a single storefront in Boston. To be certain, these were not supermarkets. They were not full-service groceries. It would be a huge stretch to even call them convenience stores. In fact, the only thing convenient about these stores was how easy it was to commit SNAP benefit fraud. To put this in perspective, the Jesuela Variety Store is less than 150 square feet in size, smaller than some bathrooms. The Saul Mache Mixe store was approximately 500 square feet in space. By contrast, a supermarket can be 20,000 to 60,000 square feet in size, have a dozen or more registers, and employ numerous employees. Both the Jesuela Variety and Saul Mache Mixe stores had one register, no carriages, no hand baskets, and very little food for sale. One legitimate supermarket in the same area as these stores redeems approximately $80,000 in SNAP benefits per month. Over the last 20 months, the Jesuela Variety Store was redeeming between 3 and 6 times that amount monthly, with nowhere near the space, inventory, customers, or infrastructure to support it. The Saul Mache Mixe store redeemed over $120,000 in SNAP benefits in the last 6 months. Simply put, there is no plausible way SNAP eligible food could have been purchased from these stores for this long. Yet, these two stores are alleged to have illicitly trafficked nearly $7 million in SNAP benefits.
Yeah, so even just based on those introductory details alone, I don't think it's exactly all that difficult to figure out exactly what is going on here. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, right, to wonder why you have a storefront that's extremely tiny. They barely sell anything. There's nothing really on the shelf. And somehow they redeemed $7 million worth of SNAP coupons from the federal government, you know? Meanwhile, the other grocery stores in the area that are bigger, sell way more stuff, and are actually legitimate, get way less from the EBT exchange there. Yeah. And, you know, I again look at that and ask, how the heck did the local government or the state government not also look at that and say, well, what the heck is going on here? Why is it every single time the federal government, only under the Trump administration, you notice that specifically, steps in and says, oh, you're under arrest. Oh, we caught you in obvious fraud, right? But of course, yes, you're innocent till proven guilty. We still need the evidence. That's merely just kind of circumstantial or tying things together. It's just pure suspicion. So you may be asking yourself, how exactly did they nail these people and figure out what they were doing? And exactly like what was the mechanism by which they were defrauding the whole SNAP program? Well, take a listen here for those exact details as well. It turns out, yeah, there was a little bit of a right-wing conspiracy theory here being proven. All right.
Far beyond what is remotely possible for businesses of their size, type, and location. Since March of 2024, the Jesuela Variety Store had monthly SNAP redemptions that consistently exceeded $100,000. In the previous 20 months, the monthly SNAP redemptions were between $200,000 and $300,000 a month. In one of those months, the redemptions exceeded $500,000. Investigators' suspicions of fraudulent activity were confirmed on the ground. During the course of this investigation, undercover officers used EBT cards to traffic SNAP benefits for cash at both the Jesuela Variety Store and the Saul Mache Mixe store. The defendants themselves were working the cash registers, and both exchanged SNAP benefits for cash with the undercover officers. Observations made by the undercovers showed that it was just as easy for anyone with an EBT card to walk into either store and convert hundreds of dollars in SNAP benefits into cash, all tax-free. The defendants even sold liquor in exchange for SNAP benefits, an outright violation of federal law. And perhaps most disturbing, both stores sold donated food products known as manna packs. These are meals manufactured by the nonprofit Feed My Starving Children, which are paid for entirely by charitable donations and are intended to be shipped directly to food insecure children overseas, including children in Haiti. These products are not for sale anywhere. Yet Bonner and Elise May were selling them in their stores for nearly $10 a pack, profiting from food literally intended for starving children in disaster zones. The investigation also uncovered extensive financial manipulations. Because the stores had little legitimate inventory and almost no lawful income, the defendants relied almost entirely on USDA-funded SNAP redemptions. To conceal their fraud, they used numerous bank accounts to transfer the SNAP benefits around between the accounts they controlled to create the illusion of a legitimate business activity. They also funded certificates of deposits and hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash withdrawals to keep enough cash on hand to pay out their customers. What were missing from the financial records were the things you would expect in any real grocery store, such as charges for wholesale invoices or large purchases for food inventory. Instead, the accounts reflected round-trip transactions, cash movements, and internal transfers to launder the SNAP proceeds. This case exposes a serious breakdown in oversight. Bonner's greed and fraud had no limits. Despite redeeming millions in SNAP benefits through his store, Bonner fraudulently obtained his own EBT card. The court documents indicate that between 2022 and the present, he cashed himself out for over $10,000 in SNAP benefits.
Yeah, so there you have your answer, right? This is how they were doing it. Basically, this was a place where people who have EBT cards or food stamps could go inside, exchange those for cash, right? So the EBT recipients get cash instead of food stamps. Then the store owners who now have the EBT food stamps would, because they're quote unquote store owners, right, would go redeem that from the federal government. And so both sides here are kind of committing fraud. And that's something that I want people to keep in mind. There's a very important point to be made about that. Not the only bad people in this story are necessarily just the store owners. One point we tried to raise over and over again when we were talking about this issue during the government shutdown, and please listen closely about this, right, is the fact that there are massive amounts, if not maybe you could argue the majority of EBT food stamp recipients in America. I mean, it's 40 million people after all. Like, how could that even be possible, right? Are in some way or another, I would argue, defrauding the system. And it's not necessarily fraud always in a criminal sense that we're talking about, like, oh, providing false information or receiving dead people's food stamps or illegal aliens or whatever. I think there's also maybe the most mainstream epidemic here is people who maybe technically, according to their financials, are legally eligible for food stamps, but don't actually really need them, right? They're not genuinely starving or anything like Democrats go and claim. And as a result of that, what you have on one hand are a bunch of people, I mean, you see like some of these TikToks where they're buying the most insane stuff on food stamps, right? Just taking advantage of the system. But another point we also covered is this very widespread issue where a lot of these EBT people will be like, oh, okay, the government said, yes, I have it. And then they'll just go, yeah, sell those food stamps to other people for cash, right? And usually probably less cash than what the SNAP card is worth. But after all, hey, money is money. They never had to pay directly for the EBT because it's quote unquote free from the government, right? Obviously funded by the taxpayer. And so they're walking out ahead. And so this is a business actually by a lot of the recipients is, hey, I'm going to receive them. I'm not going to use them. Go sell them to other people, have cash, and then use that to go buy what? Likely drugs, liquor. You know the story there. And so while, yes, the store owners here are absolutely criminals, I don't think it should at all exonerate the people who were also in on the fraud, which is the SNAP recipients themselves. Yet again, proving the conspiracy theory, quote unquote, that I was pushing about this, that like, yeah, there's widespread advantage that's being taken of the system. Because after all, they made $7 million, guys. So you want to tell me, oh, it's just a few people. You know, the majority of the recipients on EBT, they actually need it. They're using it for a good purpose. It seems to me, at least in this neighborhood, but surely it wouldn't be everywhere else in America, right? That no, this is a pretty widespread thing. And I'm sure people maybe who have lived it or experienced it could attest to that as well. I mean, I'm sure there'll be people in the comment section being like, yeah, I know so-and-so who sells the EBT card for cash. Because yes, it is indeed common. So that's on one hand. And then secondly, of course, we have the question of the store owners themselves, because you can currently see the way this is being framed by the mainstream media. Keep in mind, these two, yes, were Haitian immigrants now. I don't know exactly how they acquired legal status. If I were to guess, it was through the diversity green card lottery, especially given the context, right? They're from Haiti there. But ABC News, for example, is saying, quote, 2 Massachusetts men trafficked nearly $7 million worth of benefits intended for people who cannot afford food, federal prosecutors in Boston said Wednesday. And Stephen Miller, of course, responds by saying they were not, in fact, Massachusetts men. So that's how they're trying to hide the fact here that they're Haitian. And why is that? Because there's been a growing conversation, obviously, from Trump and basically the whole right wing on this issue of, well, it's politically incorrect. Oh, that's offensive. No, it's just true. Third world migration, right? Why is it specifically when it comes to either welfare fraud or in some cases violence, crime, and terrorism, it always seems like they're specifically coming from certain places in certain countries. You know, many of you may remember the Springfield, Ohio debacle under the Biden administration. Right now, we're talking a lot about the widespread fraud, immigration fraud, welfare fraud, you name it, from the Somali community over in Minnesota. But here's the greater point I would like to make about all of it. I think first and foremost, it is important to point out that, yes, these people are quote unquote legal immigrants. And I think that's not proof that, oh, well, therefore there's no story. No, it's proof that our entire immigration system, not just illegal immigration, needs a serious rehaul. As I said before, these people most likely came through, just given the context of Haiti, the diversity green card program that was introduced by the 1990 Immigration Act. That's the same Immigration Act that really, you noticed ever since 1990, it feels like the immigration problem has exploded. Like, yes, the 1965 Immigration Act made some pretty serious overhauls. You did see an increase in immigration through those decades. But I mean, I'm sure most Americans sort of have this feeling. What's been going on in the last 30 years? Well, that is exactly it, right? We had the H-1B visa system. We have this diversity green card thing. So in other words, right, there's all the rhetoric about immigration. Oh, well, we want people to contribute to the country and let's bring in the best of the best. Oh, we want to bring in Albert Einstein and Elon Musk. And yet, apparently, we now have a green card system that says the opposite, right? Let's just randomly select. This is basically what the diversity lottery does, right? Let's just randomly select anyone from third world countries who decide they want to be an American and say, oh, welcome to this country. And surely, that's going to go over so well. So yeah, so it's definitely something that needs to be addressed there. And I've been calling for this for a while, as you guys well know. But as we have this immigration conversation, I think that there needs to be a serious acknowledgement, no matter how politically incorrect it is, that first and foremost, again, oh, this is so offensive, whatever. There's a difference between first world and third world countries. I'm sorry, there just is, right? And it's not necessarily just about GDP per capita or human development or whatever, right? There's also a difference in, let's say, culture, let's say people. Understand? This is not to say that every person who comes from those countries is bad or is engaged in crime, nor is it to say that the fraud and crime issues are exclusively only happening in these communities. But let's just be honest. Folks, there's a difference between first and third world countries. There just is, right? And I'm not necessarily even just describing, oh, well, like this country fell to communism, so people fled or something, but before that it was actually functional. No, there are countries on Earth, I know this hurts to say, but it's just the simple reality, that have like never built a successful civilization ever, okay? I mean, look at, for instance, at Somalia, they're still living in the tribal clans that existed something like 2,000 years ago, and there's been virtually no development, okay? And so, again, let's just be real. I'm sure there's an exceptional 1% in basically every country who you could bring here and they do great, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sorry, when you're importing mass populations from countries that, again, are not like in a time necessarily just where they're struggling in that decade, but just have never built anything successful ever, why do you expect the average result of that to be successful in this country? Like, what do you think's going to happen? Right? It's just a simple truth. Like, I get that offends people. It feels much more comfortable to have this belief that, the people who come here really love the country and, the melting pot, whatever. But let's just be real about this, right? If we were to have an honest, candid conversation, on net, on average, has the post 1990 third world migration, and that's what it is, that has exploded into the United States of America, been a net positive or a net negative for America, right? And I'm not talking about, oh, well, I know some store owner down the street who came under that and is a really good guy and he loves the country. Yeah, I understand that. I'm not trying to say everyone. I'm talking, you need to understand, right? We're having an immigration conversation. It is kind of about the averages, right? It's not because you're letting in a large population of people. You need to be cognizant of, okay, it's going to be more so the rule than the exception. That's called the exception for a reason. And I think if we were to really think about that, the answer would be very obvious, right? Like en masse, the people who come from countries who have had long histories of dysfunction and they've never really had function in history come here and still have dysfunction here. And really that shouldn't actually surprise anyone, you know? I remember too, as it pertains to this fraud issue and maybe why it's so prevalent, I forget who I heard this take from. It was from someone else, but I remember hearing it and thought, wow, that's just so accurate. It's so true, right? Is that it's not just, again, about like technological innovation or infrastructure or GDP per capita. There is an objective difference between, let's say, the mentality of people in the first world versus the third world, right? Because I think these higher concepts of, let's say, ethics, you know, compassion for others, kindness, hey, an honor code to a degree. You know, I'm not going to fraud the government. I'm not going to steal from the system that's immoral, whatever. Let's be honest, it doesn't really exist in third world countries. And to a degree, why is that? Because when you grow up in a place that is so violent and poor and unstable, like say a Haiti, like say a Somalia, maybe you don't even blame them for it necessarily. But yes, you will kind of be instilled with this very, I'm fighting to survive, tribalistic mindset, you know? And I think you see that, by the way, in these very countries. You know what I mean? And to an extent, I mean, it's not to say you don't have love for anyone or compassion or care, but largely that's probably exclusively limited to, say, you, your family, maybe your tribe or your clan, especially in a country like Somalia. But that kind of more, let's say, ancient primitive mindset, right, doesn't extend to, say, the other tribe or the wider nation or everyone else around you, right? You're basically fighting for survival. Here's the thing, though, right, is that when you're raised in that kind of harsh of an environment and you're kind of just plopped into the first world, sure, maybe there's some people who elevate and they say, oh, I get to live like a first worlder now, right? I'm not just fighting to survive. I can live for happiness and meaning and all these things. But to a degree, I think part of the reason why you so often see this type of fraud stuff coming from third world nations is, no, they get over here and they still think in the same way, right? It's not about ethics. It's not about, criminality, whatever it is. Hey, I can steal from the government and get away with it. I'm just going to do that, right? There's no conversation that I'm fighting to survive after all, you know? And they're coming from countries where probably if they can get away with that, it's not necessarily prosecuted. So just something to consider there as well, right? If you come from a place that doesn't live remotely like a Western first world country does, and you expect them to come over here and just magically change everything they were raised with, it doesn't always necessarily work. So keep that in mind as well, right? Third world migration, it really is a problem, and it's a conversation we need to have. And we shouldn't pretend like all immigration necessarily is the same, because it's just not. It's just not. Anyways, that said, though, guys, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.